Grab hands. Yes, we are. Dear Lord, we thank you for this fellowship. We thank you for those who have supported the December 26er brand and help us get to the next level. I'm grateful that we're able to have dialogue and exchange ideas. We ask you to bless this food and make it nourishing into our bodies, and bless those who have helped us bring this concept into fruition. In Jesus' name, amen.
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 Bless this food.
Welcome to the December 26er 1-year anniversary dinner. Thank you. So happy to have you all here. We talked a little bit about why we're doing this. We've had a number of guests over the last, 7-8 months at this point, all of whom we value and respect, and we will be doing more of these dinners over time. However, we wanted to launch with those who we felt brought a good mix of perspectives, strong personalities, yes, and could actually inhabit and embody what we want, and that is a lively dialogue. So we're going to be eating some food, hopefully sharing some laughs, talking about issues and addressing questions that have been posed by people who are huge fans of the show and fans of you. And hopefully it is a good conversation. Shall we get started?
All right.
Okay. Round 1 of food. Are we ready?
Round 1. Food.
Okay. So this first round, this first course here is for the meat eaters, jerk shrimp with pineapple salsa.
Okay.
And for the vegetarians, vegetable spring rolls. So while we're waiting, what did you guys expect this to be? What did you think it was going to be?
Someone told me to make sure I knew where the exit was. Somebody was like, well, that sounds like a setup for like a murder mystery. I was like, no.
Not exactly.
I was thinking Nino Brown in New Jack City. Like everybody's at that moment.
Yes.
You got the
Sit your
$5
$5 before I make change.
Before I make change.
It's funny you mentioned the table. I was not expecting a round table.
Me either.
What were you
But it says
expecting?
round table in the thing.
Because India reads, so
Clearly.
I expected a round table. I expected a round table. I expected a long table.
you
For
ex-
some reason, like,
I expected a conference room
I'm
table.
not touching that.
I just showed up.
so you expected a figurative round table.
Yes.
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 Thoughts about what we might discuss tonight? Any suspicions?
Well, so I'm a little nervous because going on the show and how like in depth you were, so I could just only imagine what's going to be discussed here today. So,
But here's the thing, it's not just about me, it's about interfacing with the other guests as well and the questions that they may have. But don't just put it on me. I'm not the only one mining for information tonight, for sure. People are nervous, for real?
Well, I mean, the fact that you brought up that there are questions from the audience, it's like, oh, wait a minute.
that is interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
How were they submitted? How were the questions?
Text, email,
Oh, got it.
someone even sent a video question in.
Wow.
Yeah, so here's the thing.
That is
Here's the thing about this show. You know, we have a cult following, but people are committed. So when we drop a new episode, that episode is scheduled. It drops in the middle of the night. When we wake up at 6 a.m. and check, there's this core group of people who between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. have listened to the show.
Wow.
So there are people that know your stories. And I know this because I go to a wedding or I go to a dinner and they say, hey, I listened to Purvis' episode about the rats in the apartment. Or I heard Tyrone's episode about 3-time failed Olympian. I heard Jeff's episode about his stutter. I heard India's episode about how she had to step up and really care for her family after the loss of her brother-in-law. They know. And I think even as the host, sometimes I forget that these episodes are not just about us.
Right.
And there are people who are drawing from your stories and who have opinions, sometimes very strong opinions about what you have said. So they have questions and they're curious and they want to know more and they want to know your opinions on key issues, societal or otherwise.
That's great.
And I forgot how much I went in.
Me too.
You
I was like, okay, I said that.
I said the joke. Like, what you talking about? I'm looking, I'm like, what's she talking about?
That's one of the things that my mother did discuss when she listened to the episode. She's like, we really talked about
Yes.
it. You know, it was one of those moments, and it's just listening. I remember when I listened to it, I was like, oh, okay, I'm good with all of this. But you know, I do think that you have a great ability to really unravel individuals in an organic way.
Yeah,
It's
right.
I
natural.
agree.
Yeah, totally.
And you care. And
Right.
we know that you care and you're speaking to us.
And you've done your research, which I think you pride yourself on. You talk about that in initial conversation and also during right when the interview was starting, but it's very clear that you have definitely made authentic questions.
And for me, it's important not just to make a great show, but we are marginalized, not just out in the world, but in the podcast space as well.
Absolutely.
So if we're going to do this and we're going to showcase our stories, we're going to do them in an in-depth manner that shows that A, we are not a monolith. B, we have unique experiences, but there are commonalities that bind us, and we achieve in spite of that fact. So if they're not going to tell our stories, and we create this platform to do so, why not do a deep dive? Who's really unraveling why we are the way we are and why we think the way that we do?
Right.
So, and there are other podcasts out there that I love that are doing that, but we need to do it more.
Right.
Especially unraveling who we are at our darkest hours, because we love to mine our lives for our light. Like, what do you feel about this? What's your opinion on this? Tell me about this accomplishment.
Absolutely.
But to say, oh, tell me about that time you fell down and thought you couldn't get up. Like, rarely do we mine those dark corners of our lives. So I love that about your podcast.
Thank you. And one thing that Damarcus said is that our podcast is not about how I built this, it's how I am building this.
Yeah.
Right.
So we're all in the journey. None of us have arrived.
He's a preacher. So.
He preaches, right? So we're still in the journey, but it's okay to big yourself up. Like we have this idea that we have to like build $100 million company or, do these amazing things before we feature our stories and what we've achieved. But the fact that we've done what we've done in spite of everything, all the trauma, and, all the things that have happened is commendable in and of itself. And that story deserves to be told before you're worth $500 million.
Oh, absolutely.
Like that.
So that's important. So please feel free to eat. Let's dig in, and we'll start talking as well. How about that? Can you guys eat and talk at the same time?
Sure.
We're gonna find out.
Use some forks and knives? Okay.
Go for it. Do what you feel.
Now, is my wife gonna watch this?
Okay. So question number 1. I often think a lot about what is accomplished being credited to intangibles that aren't on a degree or a title. What soft skills or patterns do you see in your accomplishments so far that you see in others who have comparable or larger success? Sure. So it's about essentially skills that are not necessarily the hard skills. We know you have credentials. We know you have things about you that are on your resume otherwise. But what are those soft skills
That you have, that you see that in other people?
that you also see in other people who have had larger success
Okay.
or more significant success?
Okay.
Thoughts on that?
So I would say emotional intelligence. Right? Being black, you have to know how to scan the room because, growing up, you had to do that for survival. Like I often talk about growing up when I'm in the Chinese store and everyone, in that area in Coney Island and projects were the gangbangers and the drug dealers and, it was just a really rough environment. But I had to pass through them so I can order food. But in passing through them, I had to say, yo, what's good, man? How you doing? Or knowing, okay, you know what? I can't shake his hand, but I got to just give him the dab, or like just give him the nod, right? So understanding all of that. So I would say that, putting that up with, like life experience and like the professional world, you're a machine. So I think that every person of color, knows how to navigate those spaces who, have aspired to be because they had to navigate that, especially growing up in their childhood,
So I don't think emotional intelligence is a given. I don't think just as a 31-year-old woman in my everyday life, my relationships, my friendships, there are people who do not have emotional intelligence. I mean, it doesn't exist.
Sure.
And even in the example that you gave, I don't even know if I would assign that to being emotional intelligence rather than being able to be assimilation and being able to code switch. So, but I do think that all three of those are necessary. But to the point of the question, as far as soft skill, I don't think emotional intelligence is a soft skill. I honestly think that like a soft skill to me is being able to even do proper greetings, of like being able to go into a room and shake hands, give eye contact, like soft skills that you don't necessarily learn like inherent, right? Just being able to interact and engage and being able to just have natural conversation, right?
I agree.
Yeah, because I think that emotional intelligence is a level of you've dealt with your traumas, you know what your traumas are,
And
you know what
identify them and articulate
yes,
them and process
yes,
them.
yes, and knowing when they're showing up and being able to articulate them in different ways. I mean, I think we could have a whole broader conversation about emotional intelligence, just because like I'm an advocate of therapy. Right. I'm an advocate of therapy. I think everyone should do it. I think you know, sometimes some people can get what they want from it and keep it stepping, and some people can just keep it as an ongoing process. But I do think for the question, as far as like soft skills and things that I think are very, very necessary, is for my point of view, just even in my experiences or in my career specifically, is being able to know when I am going to react in a way. I'm just very conscious of being an angry Black woman, right? Absolutely. In my environment, and you are a Black man, my women right here. I actually said this in a conversation I had recently. Someone asked me, what are your pros and cons of your personality professionally? And I said, I am heightenedly aware of being an angry Black woman. Every day I walk into the office, I make a conscious decision to not be angry. And it is James Baldwin. A woke Black person is literally the most angry individual in the entire world. So I don't know if that's a soft skill either, but I think in an environment where I'm definitely in a minority, I'm a senior in leadership in my agency that I work in, I am aware as a Black woman of, you know, just how I have to be a bit more docile. How I have to be a bit more softer. I need to be a bit more accommodating. I need to put smiley faces after my messages. I need to not use exclamation marks. I need to not talk with my hands when I'm talking to my CFO.
Or read your email several times and see how they can be interpreted.
I need to be able to interpret tone in an email and not want to turn up. I need to know that it's probably going to take me 6 times to write a response before I can send it. I don't know if that's a soft skill.
It is a soft skill.
Intuition.
Intuition.
That
It's a
other
social
people
intelligence.
can, because you're in because other people have not had to be mindful of what other people are thinking and see that there is
So maybe
slight
we
reaction.
call it mindfulness.
Mindfulness.
And it's also a
mindfulness.
form of intuition. It is a
Yeah.
form of intuition.
Yeah.
In terms of soft skills, and we've discussed this, I would say the ability to make someone feel seen and affirmed in your presence.
That is spot on.
That's like that sort of magnetism, and it's being able to influence people by making them like who they are and how they feel when they are with you. And I think when you can do that, from an Oprah to Barack Obama, actually Michelle is better at it than Barack, but you know, when you can do that, I think you can in some ways write your own ticket. I think it's a valuable soft skill, and I don't know if this is a soft skill, but instinct. Being able to carry your instinct with it's a hard soft skill.
It's a hard soft skill because it's like
That's trusting your gut. Instinct is
But
trusting
it
your gut,
should
right?
be trusting your gut, and it's trusting that like innate intelligence that's beyond you,
Right.
and being
That's
able
one
to
of the
pair
experiences,
that
right.
with, and it does partially come from experiences, but being able to pair that and that ability to kind of sense the greater flow beyond you with your actual intelligence.
Right.
And I always say emotion leads you to passion, but instinct leads you to purpose. And I think for a lot of people, being able to feel where you are and use your instinct to guide you helps you get to where you're going rather than forcing it.
Because in reality, it's like people do business with who they like.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? So it's not about who's the best; it's about who I like.
I think I heard the best story about that.
Isn't that like building relationships? So when you were talking about soft skills, I was thinking like, what is that soft skill? And it's literally, can you build relationships?
Yes.
Right. And building relationships mean, and I think to your point, make someone feel that they are the center of your life, right? When practically they're probably not.
Right.
But because you took time to send a note to say thank you, or
Yep.
because
A handwritten
you
note.
a handwritten note. I'm still a big believer in handwritten
Yeah.
notes. Or you did something to continue checking on them. They feel that you care. And I think back to my career, and I always tell folks the only job I ever applied to, and I kind of applied to it, was my first job. Every single other job I got was because of relationships. Someone who was my champion when I wasn't even in the room. And that person said, I know someone. And the only reason why they know someone, they knew me, is because I stayed in touch with them. So I think that being able to build a relationship is a soft skill that successful people have. And it doesn't really, whether it's Obama or whoever, you see that relationship building as part of their success.
So this guy from Simon Schuster, he's just telling me about himself. He's a very famous journalist. He's telling me about himself, and then he says something about his uncle, and he kind of just passes over it. In the next conversation, I said, you know, like what you said about your uncle, he literally stopped. He said, you heard what I said? I was like, yeah, you said this about your uncle, He was like, Purvis. He said, you have no idea how much this is changing like our whole interview process because you heard me. He said, I've interviewed celebrities after celebrities, and they're just kind of like just there to be interviewed, and then they move on. And you interview them again, excuse me, and they act like they don't know who you are. I was like, no, my job is to be an active listener. As a life coach, I have to be an active listener. So like something like that, I don't know if it's necessarily can be taught. I think certain soft skills are just inherent to that person, and they just know how to tap into it. We all have superpowers, right? But everybody's superpowers look different. It's about how you tap into yours that's going to benefit you, because everybody may not be the best active listener. You know what I mean? But people may have some people may be the better hand.
No, I get that.
You know what I mean? So it's like, I don't know.
I think even if you're not the best active listener, you can learn to be better. And I think, you know, in life you can learn, you can balance out your weaknesses just enough so they don't actually counter your strengths. You know, with soft skills, I would say in our society, we live in a rough society. Our school system, for example, we emphasize STEM, which is great, but because we don't emphasize, for example, anymore the
social
arts or emotional intelligence and the way we teach to only one learning style, we miss an opportunity to teach young people soft skills.
How to develop
those soft skills. But I actually do think you can. I think it's we don't learn it in a traditional way. I think it's hard to read a book that says here's how to tap into your instinct. One of the most profound ways that I learned to tap into mine was actually through salsa dancing. I told you I started in ballet. Ballet is all about control. Salsa, especially as a woman, was completely about letting go. You know the steps, you practice the steps, you get the steps, you know the turn patterns, but when it comes time to dance, I completely have to let go and be in this moment, or else it's literally going to be a traffic jam between my partner and I. And when I realized that I could apply that instinct that I have when I'm dancing to be able to feel the step that my partner is leading to life, that's how I got instinct. So I understood what instinct was based on what the text was, but I had to experience it. So I think lifestyle and shifts in lifestyle is how we probably more so learn those soft skills versus the traditional way, my opinion.
Right, and I think culturally, we learn, especially the spaces that we navigate, and the schools you may have gone to, you learn how to read a room.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah.
so those are things that our white counterparts, the pressure may not be on them in the way that it's on us. To go in a room and learn, okay, who do I need to disarm? Who do I need to convince that I have a right to be here? Who do I have to try to find commonality with, even though we have nothing in common? So all these things are playing in your mind, and for those of us who grew up in these programs, you know, these high achiever programs, the things say to expose you to different communities and different elements of business or academia, you learn very early what you have to do to show that you deserve a seat at the table. So I think we're groomed in a way that others may not be, because we have to be to achieve and be seen as accepted and worthy of being in these folks' presence.
But maybe the ultimate soft skill might be knowing your worth.
Let's not go down a
Right,
rabbit hole.
that's hard.
Let's not go down a rabbit hole. Let's let it go.
Right.
That was that side. I work at this point, and so I
now,
no
yes.
longer try to do that anymore. I no longer try to disarm, because I'm not ashamed of who I am.
Right.
And I'm not ashamed of the gifting that I am.
Yeah. But
You know what I mean?
It takes time to get
It
Right.
takes time to get
A lot of
there.
time.
That's a journey.
It is a journey.
That's a
I would
journey.
agree with that.
For sure. But I do agree that social emotional learning, and we've had a couple of people come on the show to talk about that, needs to be taught in more formal environments and earlier, because you have situations where younger people are put in environments where they have a right to be angry.
Yes.
But when they lash out, it's, well, what's wrong with you?
Yep.
Right.
And they're not giving an opportunity to be trained in how to respond.
to advocate for
Yes.
themselves.
Right. It's because they're treated as children when it's like, it's kind of like I'm reading this book called The Celestine Prophecy. And it talks about like the woman, and there's an example in the book where someone's like, well, how old is your daughter? And she's like, no, don't talk about my daughter as if she's not in the room. If she was an adult, you would ask her how old she was directly. So talk to her directly. And it's those little moments like that are so pivotal in just understanding how we're supposed to behave and interact with children, because a lot of the control dramas that we have as individuals, the way you act out, the way you even now are all basically just remnants of how you behaved when you were a child. So whether it's like you were an intimidator, or whether you were the poor me syndrome, like different mentalities that naturally insert themselves in how we interact with everyday people are just all control dramas from when we were children.
Absolutely. In the way that our teachers, because there's so much bias in education and so much underrepresentation, especially with educators, in the way that teachers approach children of color. If a young, maybe gifted black child, especially a black boy, has a lot of energy and maybe gets what you're trying to teach them in the first grade, so they're bored. But that person is probably likely, instead of to be classified as precocious or bright, or maybe we need to challenge this child more, then it's maybe something is wrong with him. Let's send him home. Let's penalize him.
And they describe
ADHD.
Yes, and
Absolutely.
even for me, I've always asked a lot of questions, and I've always been pretty precocious. And I remember there were teachers that would tell my parents, "Oh, I think she's arrogant." I've never been arrogant a day.
Oh my God.
But it was just that I was confident. And my father, this was different from most black households. My father had this thing where Aisha was allowed to talk back. And it wasn't like I was allowed to sass. Yeah,
You're in a minority, yes.
That's why I was like, that's why she
I wasn't allowed to like sass or disrespect my parents. Like to this point, I've
You were allowed to ask questions. You were allowed to
but
question
I could
things.
question things.
Yeah.
I could say, I don't think that's
It's a little
fair.
different.
I could say like, wait, no, I didn't do that. Or, and the reason he said that was because he didn't want to raise a child, especially a black woman, that would not know how to question authority or question the things that was happening.
Absolutely.
And so I was able to go to school, and I was able to see, like, this teacher is not treating me fairly. I was able to advocate.
Yeah.
There's a difference between how she's treating these kids who don't look like me. I thought their skin was pink when I was really young. And the brown people or the pink people, like, I get it.
Right.
So, I mean, it's important to see even children.
Yeah, absolutely.
And on that point, I think that now you're making me think. Like, I think my parents too were very big on, because I went to an all-white private school, and they were very big on like, oh no, that's our culture, that's how we are, don't worry about it. Versus, what's wrong with him?
Yeah.
Right.
So I think now that I'm thinking about it, like, wow, I think that was very helpful to me
Right.
in growing up, because my parents always stood up for me, right?
Yes.
Like I went to a very Christian, super duper Christian school where men were not allowed to wear shorts. You're not allowed to show your knees, right? So
Well, that's good that they did that for men. I can't imagine what the girls
That
are.
was my mind. I was like, oh, the girls just.
girls had to wear this thing called culottes.
yeah.
So we couldn't wear shorts. So I remember it was like 90 degrees in the summertime, and and
It's hot.
and it's hot.
It's
my
hot.
parents are Haitian, right? So it was like, yo, you're wearing shorts, right? You know what I mean?
Right.
And I remember it was like,
You
oh
got the
my
tension.
gosh,
Yeah,
like you
right.
have shorts on, and it was like a big deal. Bring it to the office, and my pastor like, we're Haitian, we're from Haiti, right? You know what I mean? And I
Right.
think now that you said it, it made me like, I think what that did for me subconsciously was
Right.
giving. They were like, we Haitian.
They
We wear
validated you.
shorts. We from the Caribbean.
Right.
It's okay.
Did anybody have another point they wanted to make on that before we go to the next question? Good.
That question went all over.
It did, but that's what it's meant to do.
Yeah, I love that.
But that question almost went another way because we all was like, when we started talking about pink people.
When I was a little girl, though, I didn't, before I even understood race, I thought they were pink and I was brown. Like I didn't get white and
I used
black.
to always say, I'm not black, I'm
Yeah,
brown.
like
Yeah,
I'm brown,
right.
and they're pink.
Like, I would go to the crayon box and be like, look, this is brown.
Yes.
So since we've started on talking about those who were given the opportunity to question authority, not necessarily sass, but talk back and have an opinion, I think it's a great segue to the next question that someone submitted. Do black corporate employees curb standing up to racial or racist business practices for career advancement? How often do you think this happens? And there's a second part to that question, but let's start there.
You said curb it?
Yeah, they curb standing up.
Oh, so you just like decide to just ignore that part
Yes.
of it with being black.
I would say all the time.
It's been such a long
I
time.
say all the
since I
time.
worked in
Like
corporate.
even think about like recently when well, like I think it was Pepsi where like they had this commercial with I think
Kylie Jenner. No, Kendall Jenner.
Kendall, one of the Jenners,
It's one of
right?
my clients.
Right? And you could just only imagine how many people that had to go through for it to hit production.
Not,
You
no.
know? Right? But now, I mean, I would say that there had to be some black folks in that room or in that space. I could just only imagine, right? And then I'm just using that as an example.
Maybe do the Asian one.
No.
So yeah,
But just as an example.
Yeah. I know the story. There were no black folks in the room.
I was the one.
Which is why.
so context, India works in advertising, and this is your client, correct?
Yeah.
Got it.
So can you provide a little color to us? No pun intended.
Probably not, because this is recorded. Off the record, we can definitely talk about
Because
it.
I think with the question, what I got out of this, okay, so if you are working in a company, are you, and we've talked about we're not monolithic, but if you're the only person of color in that company, is it your job to say, hey, you know, this actually is not right? And that is a lot of pressure and stress to put on one person. And I think what the person is saying is probably, you know, do people of color who are in those situations feel empowered to actually do that? And will they be able to keep their jobs after they do it?
Well, why are you in the room then? What? No, I'm just asking. I'm not. It's for me.
Because you need that paycheck.
Yeah.
Right.
No.
You need a
I'm just
job.
saying, like, is it not an honor or a is it that not your right? One, you talked about the pressure of it, and it immediately made me think of the scene in Insecure where Issa Rae was in the room and they asked her the question, and she was like, "I don't want to be that role today. Like, I don't want to play that role today." There are people who pick and choose. Like, so to the question of like, some days you have on days and off days, and those are people who potentially aren't up for the challenge or the task. But then there are some of us who are like, no, I'm going to be that individual because I am here to make an impact consistently and forevermore. So I think to the point, I know people who do that. I know people who are just like, I don't want to wear my black card. I don't want to have my black card today. And I know individuals who are everyday woke about.
That's what I was gonna say. Like, it depends if you're the only black person. How woke is this black person? Because sometimes you may just be like, look, I just need to get checked.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
good.
No, I mean,
And there's some people who are just like, I'm here to revolutionize this whole company
Yeah.
and put y'all on the game.
Right.
And it's like, I don't know how often that takes place.
Right.
And
But
to
then when it
add
goes
to
up,
that,
then-
and to add to that, I think it depends on how you felt that day too, right?
Yeah.
Because you might be the Super Bowl guy, but you having a bad day.
And let that be the day. And let that be the day the Kendall Jenner shot goes. That's the day the Kendall Jenner shot goes. And like, so what do you think about this?
Like, yo, what up?
I approve.
I think it looks great. I think that Kendall looks great.
Because you
It's
having a
amazing.
long day at work.
Yeah.
But then tomorrow you will remember, like, wait a minute. You know what I mean? I'm back to being woke again.
Exhausting.
But that's what I'm. But,
It is
but,
exhausting.
but I think some people choose. My example, you know, I mean, well, my answer, I would say, I think it depends on where you are in that pecking order, right? Because,
Sure.
you know, as an entrepreneur, right, I have a little bit more flexibility, right? But it depends, right? Because I'm also an adjunct professor at a college where I'm the only black person in the department.
Right.
So, and I have a chairman that I have to. So during the day, I'm an entrepreneur all I want. But when it's time to go teach some kids,
Right.
I have a chairman that gave me a curriculum.
Now, when you get tenured, are you going to act differently?
Well, but it also depends too, right? Because like I said before, like,
Yes.
and I,
Short answer, yes.
no, and I'm gonna tell you why I can challenge that. I'm gonna tell you why I can challenge that because what if, and that's actually happening now, my chairman is Jeff, right? What if the president of the university is Greg, right? Because then at that point, I can be as woke as I want because I know that Jeff is the chairman of my department.
If Jeff
Greg-
is woke?
no,
Jeff is woke though.
right. I'm just saying.
Right.
But you understand what I'm saying?
Right.
I would actually
No, but
challenge
it
that. I
depends.
agree to you. I agreed with what you were saying up to a certain point. When you are at different levels in your career, you have the freedom to actually be that person.
Absolutely.
Right? If you're just entering your career and you see things that you may not like. You probably will say, all right, I'm not staying at this company, I'm going to move to another
Absolutely.
company. But if you're at a point in your career, like you're tenured, or you've got 10 years or 20 years at this
Right.
company, and you're respected, then
Right.
you could say, like, you know what? This is actually wrong, and we need to do something
Right.
different.
And you're supposed to be a
could,
voice.
And you could certainly, the risk of doing that, and you could lose your job, but
Yeah.
because you're confident with your career, you're going to get another job
And
just like that, right?
People have options today.
Find solace.
That is
Find
true.
solace in the
You
one.
got options. I agree.
But here's the thing: they have options, but it's easier to find another opportunity when you have one,
Right.
which
I
actually
don't know if
leads
it's
to.
easier. I think there's just more comfort in doing that. I don't know if it's easier to find another
I
job.
absolutely think it's easier.
I know some people have
Yeah.
said that it's easier to find a job when you have a job, but I also think that, remember when I went back to talking about if you are good at what you do, your reputation will precede you.
Absolutely.
And whether you're working or not, people will want you.
Opportunities will come your way.
They will.
People, right.
Right.
But here's the thing:
Yeah.
I want to add some context to that. Opportunities will come your way, but when you either are financially stable or you have something else, you can think more clearly about the opportunity. It's easy to make an informed decision
Yeah.
when you are collecting a
I agree. I
paycheck or
agree
you
with
have
that.
a nest egg.
I agree
when,
with this.
when your back is up against
Yeah.
the wall,
That's so true.
that's a very different interview and a very different analysis.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So I
So
think
it's
that
more
distinction
so
is
about the
important.
mental consciousness versus the fact that like opportunities are just pouring in because
Right.
of what they
Yeah,
have
no,
to do.
exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
I think when people say it's easier, it's because they're more level-headed.
Yes.
Because you are not in survival mode.
Absolutely.
Thinking I have to
Like, I just
find
gotta get
something
this
and
check.
now.
Right.
They
Exactly.
can do whatever they want to do. I need to get this check.
I wanted to share this anecdote because I'm thinking about it as you guys are talking, and I can remember like I was maybe in high school and I was actually on vacation, and it was my parents' friends were all together having dinner, and I was there probably trying to do something else. And one guy was a very successful doctor, and he was in a group, and he was saying, "Oh yes, I'm the only person of color, and my group." And this other guy was retired, and he had been like senior VP at a really major bank, really major bank. And he said, when I was in my position, I created 50 black millionaires. I counted them. He was like, I literally used my position to open the door, and I made 50 black millionaires. What have you done? And so I will never forget. That's not the conversation you ever forget. It was like dead silence, first of all, the most awkward dinner party ever. But, because this guy's like priding himself on being the only one. So it goes to show that sometimes I learned then you play the game, and so that, even if you are woke, you are playing this game so that you can be woke in a position of power and then really do something with that wokeness. So I think there are people who kind of play that game because they want to be in a position to actually really influence. Yes, but it's a burden to have to always be that person. And I think companies have figured out that like diversity pays off in terms of the bottom line, but diversity is nothing if people don't feel like their opinions are valid, and they don't feel safe authentically expressing who they are, and that's where companies, they haven't got it. They've invited us, but you don't have people who feel comfortable actually saying anything. Like they feel like there would be backlash. I think that's how those ads.
I've done those trainings before, and it's like it's stone silence.
Yes.
I said, so what do we think about race? And it's like a room full
You don't say
at Columbia.
anything.
I did it.
You called out Columbia.
I didn't say your person, whatever. So like I'm in a meeting, having this thing on race relations, doing this whole thing on cultural intelligence, right? Because they need it, right? Especially all institutions need cultural intelligence training. So I'm in there and I'm like, so what do we think about race? And everybody's quiet. Right, to your point, right? Nobody wants, white people, black, nobody wants to say anything. And so like I can feel like the tension in the room. And so I just throw out some stuff out, that people may be thinking, and it's uncomfortable. And see, that's the part. That's the problem. That's the problem. That's the work that needs to be done. It's not. It's not
hiring.
It's not. People. And even and to me, I put it off on HR. I feel like HR. That's what a true HR department should be. They should be that source.
That's not
But I'm saying like
it is. So every organization, the culture starts from the top.
Absolutely.
If if the president, if the CEO, if the
Right, the
head
head.
is not saying it is okay to have these conversations, then it's not going to happen, right? So it has to start from the top.
Look, it does start from the top. But also, if I have agreements with the CEO, whose side is the HR people gonna be on?
Oh, you have agreements directly with the CEO?
Yeah, whose side they gonna be on?
Right. But that,
Right.
that-
Right.
That's what I'm
I mean,
saying.
if you have
It starts
agreements
at the
with the
top.
head of, with your leadership, you need to go.
right.
I mean, the person that's running your organization.
Right,
But
what I'm
you
saying-
were saying that they were uncomfortable talking about race, and what I'm saying. So for using me as an example,
Yeah.
so I run an agency, and the great thing about our agency is that we have to deal with race, right? We have programs specifically about minority women. So I remembered having conversations in the office about we need more black companies, we need more Hispanic companies. I mean, we're talking about race, and people are walking by us like, we need more blacks, we need more, we're not saying, like, and people are looking at us like, but we were comfortable with it. And now that I'm in a position where I can set the culture of the organization, I'm telling like my direct reports that we need to confront this, we need to talk about this, right? And that's built into our strategic plan. So it starts at the top. And once you lay the groundwork so you can have conversations about race, then it actually makes it easier for the organization to focus on the culture. To your point, if you're not comfortable talking about race, then that's a big problem.
And people are not comfortable talking about it. Like people get upset, they start crying. I'm
It assaults them. It's like I don't see race, which to me is one of the most racist statements.
They
we've
was-
had.
You cannot
Oh,
stand
okay,
that. I
that's
don't see
privilege.
color. I don't see race.
Yeah, I don't like
See,
that.
those people don't understand about privilege, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you have to.
don't have to.
I did a leadership program, which we continue to do, where people will just ask random questions. Like, if you grew up with two parents in the household, take one step forward. If you did this, take one step forward. And by the time the room was divided, most of the people of color were in the back, and most of the Caucasians were in the front.
Yeah.
And then that was the visual representation of privilege, and some folks were crying and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, why are you crying? Like, it doesn't.
No.
But
I mean, I
know.
wouldn't assault the emotional response,
yeah.
but I do think that I think that it's eye-opening with the questions. I would
Right.
love to know what that was. That
Yeah.
sounds powerful.
It is extremely powerful. But what I said to them was, look, at the end of the day, we all made it to the front of the room, right? That's the reason why we're in this program. It took me 10 steps, and it took you 2 steps. So you just need to know that when you make it, that there are other people behind you that you need to now turn around and help them with the other 8 steps, right? That is the part that people, that when you come from privilege, you don't understand. You just assume like, well, I made it, so why can't you make it?
I
It's
told myself
because-
about the
right.
bootstraps, boy, your booststraps are.
Yours are gold.
Gucci's on. You ain't got bootstraps, bro.
Mine are strong. Yours are gold. Mine are strong.
You got Gucci shoes.
We could go real deep because when you talk about privilege, the reason why it took you 2 steps, because the 8 steps my ancestors were working on, right?
Exactly.
Like you actually used my ancestors to
paved the
You're
ground.
standing on their shoulders.
exactly.
You weren't actually walking. You were actually riding a
Right.
It's funny. So in the coaching where everybody's law of attraction. I saw a meme the other day. They said like, did you really manifest that, or was it your right privilege? And I was like,
Ouch.
I'm like this. I was like,
Everyone keeps talking about privilege these days, and it's a new front. I was doing something, an interview. Malcolm was doing an interview. We're talking about white guilt.
yeah.
And how like we can stop talking about privilege, and now we need to start talking about guilt. Like, do you have so literally Malcolm, I think, had gone up to one of his teammates or something, was like, do you have white guilt? Like, do you, and educating them about what it is. Like, if a white person doesn't feel guilty about where they are in life, then there's something wrong with them. So I thought that was very interesting, and it's a new frame of basically privilege.
But to touch that point, I think there's white people who just don't know, right? And I used to be the guy that was like, oh, really? Oh, please, you don't know, right? So, my wife's best friend's husband and I, we started going to the gym together every morning, right?
Yeah.
And, so he's a Republican. He voted for Trump, right? I'm a Democrat. I did not vote for Trump.
Right.
And he's Caucasian, and I'm black. And we go to the gym together every morning.
Okay.
So on our way to the gym, at the gym, after the gym, is arguments the whole time.
Right. Adrenaline pumping. Adrenaline pumping.
Like the whole time, right?
That's how you start.
And like that's how we start. Like really, like
Wired. He's wired.
But there's a respect.
but no, there's a mutual respect, and we're both like jokesters,
Yeah.
so it works, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
It's
like-
hard to have a rational conversation with Trump supporters, though,
No,
in my opinion. But go ahead.
But, so we have a mutual respect for each other, and we're jokesters, right? So I make jokes, he makes jokes, right? But the thing that I think I appreciate the most from my relationship with him is he would argue, and he would say like, he would say things like, "But Sam, black people, they just want to be lazy and just live off the government, right?" And I'm able to say, "No, Henry, that's not that. It's because of X, Y, and Z, right?" Or me. White people, y'all did X, Y, and Z. And he's like, actually, that's not the case, Sam.
Right.
This is what this means and what that means and what that means.
That sounds tumultuous.
And I'm at a place now where I look at things a little bit different because of his perspective. He's at a place now where he looks at he went to South Carolina with his family, and then he called me. He was like, Sam, I think I understand this whole statue thing. I think I get why you guys don't want the Confederate statues.
Really now?
No, but he called me.
But it was a revelation for him.
Absolutely. And then this to take a step forward at his Thanksgiving dinner, right? When he was around the room with his family, and they was asking, "Well, what are you thankful for?" Right? And he told me, he stood up. He said, "I'm thankful for my friend Sam because I now understand that we didn't just wake up like this." And then his family members approached him afterwards. They were like, "Wait, who's this Sam guy?" You're talking to? What do you mean by that? And I think that is, and now he's unapologetically speaking about it. Like, we've done this, we've done that. Like, that's not fair.
Well,
We
let
should
me
be doing
ask
X, Y,
a
Z.
follow-up question.
Yeah.
Is it our job to always educate?
Oh,
You know,
absolutely.
that's what I was gonna say, because that's a beautiful story, and we need more of that.
I felt your energy.
But
energy
but
too.
for
I felt the
him,
energy too. And then
For
I felt the
him.
energy too. I felt the energy.
It's my arms, relax my arms,
She's
sorry.
like, no, cute story. She was like, you should have pushed him in his face. She was like, wait, so I want to hear, after you punch him in his face, then what?
Well, I think we do need more conversations. Like, you guys found common ground, and from there,
And he was willing.
the thing is, for somebody like that, understanding is an elective, and for you, it's a course requirement, and that's kind of the issue.
Hey.
Because for a lot of people, maybe I'll try understanding today, maybe not, and I think for the most part, I think sometimes one of the gaps in understanding is this idea of, you mean to tell me I'm not inherently superior?
Right.
And if your identity, your core identity, is been defined by your superiority in relationship to another group, that's your identity. And somebody, it could be that person that sits next to you in your office who speaks well and does well, and you think that they're supposed to be ignorant because you've been taught your whole life that you are inherently superior and you have what you have because you're just better, and that affirmative action is taking away from you to give these people who are inherently inferior than you, and somebody makes you question that core identity, you may respond in rage. You may respond in very trigger ways.
And I've had
I think
those
we see
moments.
that.
I've had those moments too.
Yeah.
Right. I've had those moments, especially after reading Selfish Plug, The Black Tax by one of my fraternity brothers, right? Sean Rochester. You guys all should read it. After reading a book like that, absolutely. So I have lashed out as the angry black man, and going back to the first question, I didn't care because it was like, whatever, what are you gonna do?
I don't even mean rage on your part. I mean white rage.
Oh, but
I mean white rage. I think what
but
we're seeing is a reaction. I think what we're seeing right now is white rage in reaction to Obama,
absolutely.
basically making people question their very core identity. Like, who is
Absolutely.
this black man who's
Yeah.
intelligent with these children and this wife
Absolutely.
and what? This
Absolutely.
goes against everything I've been told my whole life.
Yeah.
White rage, Charlottesville.
Right.
Like what?
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
But it goes back to what you're saying again, because in spite of that white rage, we still have to act,
Absolutely.
like we can't have black rage.
You can't respond in
Right.
kind.
So how do we ever turn it off though, right? Because I remember when I was, like I'm seeking a therapist now. Therapy is fantastic, and
Yes,
celebrate.
good job.
Right. No, thank you. Like in one of my sessions, I was telling her about, all of the things I don't want to do for the black community, and you know, like, and it's causing a whole lot of anxiety. And she asked me a question, and she said, "Who appointed you to be Moses?" Right? You know, and then I was like, well, when I was 18, you know, and like go into the scenario. But then, you know, I then had to ask myself, yo, you know what, like that is true, because it's a lot, right? You know, so like, when can we turn it off, if ever? You know.
We can't turn it off.
We can't.
I just know, I keep hearing you guys keep talking about it's a burden, it's a lot, but I'm like, but who's assigning it being a lot when it could? Why is it just not natural?
Well, I mean, no, because think about it, like every room. So I'm, you know, like I'm an entrepreneur now, but growing up and even in my like corporate experience, it was traumatic. Like, you know, so much so that me and my black coworker couldn't be seen together, because it was looked upon as, what are these two guys talking about? You know,
What kind of culture was that?
Why did you work there?
What? Because
You just say why did
it was $150,000.
But you guys keep saying this, but I'm just like, you guys, I guess I'm trying to find the balance.
But sorry. I was gonna say, like, being a black man is there's additional burdens on us that I think we're not maybe explaining like correctly, and I don't even know how you'll understand unless you were walking in our shoes.
And being a black woman, and being a black woman.
Black women are the most disrespected people in the world.
So basically,
Just
the
so
same
we're
way,
all clear.
just to touch what Greg is saying, the same way how you can tell me I'll never understand.
Yeah.
It's the same way I'm going to tell you you'll never understand.
Right.
That's what
I hear you.
so-
But
but-
black women are the ones that are patting your back at the end of the night.
Right,
So
right,
we're still
right.
coaxing you as you're going
Totally.
through
I
it.
mean, so it's a union, but I think like the question is like, can you turn it off, right? Because with me, you know, it was traumatic, you know,
Right.
because it, you know, here you go, we're in this corporation, it's two, you know, young, charismatic, graduate, you know, both of us have master's degrees, etc. And we were seen as threats. So much so that, you know what, like we couldn't be seen together, and then, you know, they would like say, oh, you know what Jeff is talking about. Like, so it was just really dividing us, right? So now it's like, okay, what do we do about it? I ultimately did leave, right? You know, so like, I just said, I just couldn't do this anymore.
Right. No,
right?
for sure.
But then now, I guess like the question is, yes, you know what, you do want to stand up for your community, and you do want to be as vocal as possible.
Right.
But when can you just be a regular human being as well? You know what I mean? Like
But
that's
I
just the
wanna make a
question.
quick point. Jeff was able to leave because Jeff was able to get out, but there's a lot of people who just can't.
Yeah.
Right.
They can't.
Or they don't, or they don't see a way out.
Yeah.
Right.
But so you're sacrificing your sanity and your happiness for the check, which I think goes back to the overall question of curving it, because that sounds like trauma.
Well, so,
what
I
you
mean,
were talking about, it sounds like trauma.
It is.
I think that I
It is
could,
something.
Yeah.
you know, and then like me, you know, like I think I have options, right? So I can do, you know, like I can figure it out, right? And I have, but not everyone, you know, is in that.
Or there are other
mindset,
pressures too,
Right.
family, wife,
Exactly.
children,
No, yeah,
where
yeah,
you may
exactly.
take a
Sure.
step before
Right.
you decide to pack up your
Right.
little office belongings and walk out.
Right.
Right.
And then going back to patting us on the back, like, so luckily my wife, you
Right.
know, she, you know, is the person who's, you know, supporting and, you know, just making sure that I, you know, survive, right?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? But not everybody has that.
Absolutely not.
But I want to highlight something here, because it got really heated at the table when we started talking about who has the worst experience. There's always this question around.
I just, you know.
You notice I stopped talking.
Yes, right.
Like,
So, and I've been a part of these conversations over brunch in corporate environments. We even talked about it a little bit on the show with guests on the show. There's always this idea of like black men are treated the worst in their jobs and the environment, and then black women saying we are the most disrespected, disregarded, thrown aside, you know, human beings on the planet. Why is it that we can't find our unified struggles and focus there and figure out how to overcome them, as opposed to having this oppositional view around who has it worse? So we're going to take a pause for a moment so I can introduce David Price, owner of Noir Club, who's going to present our wine for the evening. And Noir Club is one of our sponsors for this event.
So we have the 1979 barreled red blend, 2016 vintage chocolate block.
I love the name. I love
Cachet will be pouring this wine for you, and it's available for purchase right outside there. But enjoy the wine. It's very smoky, and it should pair perfectly with your milk.
Thank you.
So, and just to give David a shout out. Noir Club is a minority-owned wine subscription business, and they source their wines from minority and women-owned wineries as well. It's very cool. It's very cool. Great call. And while we're shouting people out, let's just continue here. Do you like the space?
Love
Do
it.
you like the space? Shout out to Jude Bernard, who is an upcoming guest on the show, who is also a sponsor this evening and invited us in to take and make use of this incredible location that is also Black owned.
I love it.
Right?
Love it.
And you see this beautiful tablescape? Do we love the table setup
Yes,
here?
it's designed amazingly.
Special thank you to Ajwa Iden and her crew from Taste Events, who conceptualized the aesthetic you see here tonight.
Conceptualized. I love that. Curated. Love it.
And also happens to be my best friend. So
Yeah.
you got to get the talented
Right,
best friend.
right.
So we're grateful for her and her team, who are my sisters as well. And it's one thing to have an idea and try to go at it alone. It's another thing to have people who see the vision and are willing to invest and get in the trenches with you. And that's what we consider all of you to be, and the folks who came together tonight to make sure that this was possible.
That's great.
You know, we got a little turned up. We got a little heated when this conversation around who has it worse, Black men or Black women, came up. Why is it that we can't unify and focus on our common challenges and how we work together to overcome, as opposed to this concept of trying to figure out who is in a worse off position?
Or pitting this one against that.
I don't know if we were pitting. I think it was triggered when you asked the question about why is it a burden? And the way it came across was that you couldn't understand why it was a burden, right? So that's what triggered me. It wasn't necessarily like, well, who has it worse? It was just like, look, you're not going to understand, right? But you did make a great point, right? Our Black women, they are there at the end of the day to like help us through as a Black man. And you know, in certain cases, if you're not, if you can't, I want to say like emphasize, like
Empathize.
there you go. I need some.
I got you.
Yeah. But like if you can't do that, then you're not necessarily, you won't understand why somebody's coming home upset. You know what I mean? So that goes to a whole other question about whether or not interracial relationships, et cetera, like if you can get that from that. But I do think I reacted because it was a trigger. It's almost like, how do you not know like the burdens that I'm carrying, right? So that.
Well, it's tea out too.
All right, let's go.
It's okay. You got my hand like this.
My face is more dramatic.
My sister just does what it
is. I just have
is.
a dramatic face.
Look, we like this.
All right, Aisha, do you want to respond?
I think like to the issue of compassion, like I am an idealist. I do believe that like being able to empathize is very important. But I do think that oftentimes what you find is that oppressed people often have to study the ways of their oppressors for survival. So what you'll find is just the way that we've kind of had to walk into a room of mostly white people and study the room real quick and figure out how are we going to survive in this room. You'll find that Black women have to do that twice because we have to do that in terms of how do we survive in this white world and how do we survive in this male-dominated world. And so I think we do empathize a lot of times
I would say
with Black men, but it does happen a lot.
Yeah.
Because I am not here saying nobody's empathetic, no, but sometimes it doesn't happen in reverse, and you'll find that some people, for them, for some Black men, and this is I think where you will run into the problem, in the tension rather, they want to eradicate their oppression but still being able to oppress women. And for Black women who have because our patriarchy is built on male domination, and it happens in very, very subtle ways. And so for you have in every culture, in particular in a white capitalist patriarchy, women of color have the least to benefit from the entire system,
Absolutely.
which is why you'll find that often we are the most radical. And so we are interested in not just destroying the oppression that's race-based, but also destroying male oppression. I think sometimes you'll find that our lovers can't understand when it comes to that part. So.
Oh wow.
I just,
That was a mouth.
Okay.
So I was gonna say for black women and even for black men, I would say you said 2 times, right? I would say 3 times for black women because you don't want to just survive, you want to thrive.
Thrive, exactly.
So that's the third level. Like how I just make it, and then how do I turn this mother effer around where I'm
In my
running
favor.
it in my favor?
Right.
But we do understand the plight of black men. We do understand that, especially in the workplace, that a lot of times for black women, if we have any advantage, it's the advantage of being disarming. It is an advantage that sometimes people underestimate us because we're women. As a black man, when you're intelligent and confident, right off the bat, you're a threat. There are people who don't see me as much of a threat because at the end of the day, like, she's a woman. And I can either play into that or defy that. That's my choice, and it's not that's not a great thing. That's sexism, but sometimes I guess it can work to the advantage. But I think for black men so we saw that with Barack Obama. There's this sense of, well, who does he think he is? You know, and I think, I think black men can't rely on that ability to disarm, especially when they are not really playing that classic Uncle Tom role.
Thank
so,
you, I appreciate it.
yeah.
Additional thoughts? Nothing left
Well,
to be said?
she just disarmed us right now.
Literally
Such
talked you all
elegance.
into silence and submission,
Elegance in
it
class.
seems.
it was amazing. It was
was
very
amazing.
well
It was,
said.
I mean, yes. So I totally understand. I think going back, I think the question was, why do we always have to one up on each other
Versus being unified. Yeah.
and versus being unified? And I think you hit a point that I understand as well, because in that same exercise where we were talking about privilege, I understood my privilege of being a male. I also understood my privilege of being over 6 feet, right? Because when I walk into a room, I command attention of the room, right? That is something you will never get because you're not a male and you're not tall, right? So I
But
totally.
I got these stilettos.
Right. So I get it. And I think, one of the things that when it comes to but I do think we do unify, especially when we see, at least I'll say, when we see our people being treated unfairly, I think it's instinctual for us to actually react, right, and actually try to figure out whether it's a male or a female. Like we're going to, like, because it's a person that we identify with, we're going to react.
There's a question that came in, basically asking, why does it always seem like there's an inherent need for there to be one-upmanship in successful couples that are black? So black men and black women, there's an inability for them to be on par, both high earners, both achieving, and making strides together. Why is that so difficult for us and I'm not saying that that's inherently true, but that's the question. Is it impossible for 2 black people to be successful, as the majority, to be successful and achieve and both be on the same level?
I don't think it's impossible. I think we have great examples of that, right? We mentioned Michelle, we mentioned Barack, Jay-Z, Beyonce. I think we have great examples of that. I want to go back before and defend men.
Go for it.
Thank you.
One of the things that I think is not talked about is who is the most highly educated class of people in this country? Black women, right? When it comes to rate, and I guess it has a lot to do with where I sit in finance and money and looking at it. If you look at, well, let's go all the way back to another passion of mine, which is mentoring young men. Everywhere I go in the inner cities to mentor young men, the boys are always behind. They can't read, they can't write. They're behind the girls.
Right.
Then you look at once these young men step out into their society, right? They have to do all the things that we said at the beginning of the conversation, and then let's look at the numbers of young black males that are in prison. Let's look at the number of young black males that are on Wall Street, that are doctors, that are lawyers, that are politicians, right? So I don't think we should be pitted against one another, but I don't think it's fair to say that one has it harder than the other. But I think one of the things that needs to be understood is it is very, very, very hard to be a black man in this country. It is very hard. It's very hard to be a black woman as well. But I think one of the things that happens is because, and put it this way, look at the imagery of a black man, right? What do we always see as a successful black man in this country? What's championed, right? I was listening to a podcast on the way here, two successful white men, and they were discussing what African-American boys should be looking at as being successful. And the guy, the podcast host, out of his mouth said, well, you know, I love hip hop, but it's clear that, you know, rappers don't save their money and they don't have any economic values. And who are you to speak on those topics? But that's what they see us as opposed to men who are in their same genre that they could have gotten on that podcast and spoken to for perspective. So to come to your question now, I think one of the things that, and we've had this discussion on the second podcast that we did was, I think from my experience, what I hear is, again, you have women who are highly educated, very, very successful, right? Black women are very much more entrepreneurial than black men, way far ahead of raising capital and owning businesses, right? The numbers bear it out. What then happens is we're not keeping up with that pace, right? You graduated twice the rate that we do, right? So, and then you look at the jobs that my father had for 40 years when he couldn't read and write. As a tire man, those jobs have gone away. So without the education, without the ability to step into the marketplace and provide, now you have a situation where, as we've seen in plenty of conversations and now in society, right? You have this cognitive aristocracy of people who you just mentioned, very successful women marrying successful men. Whereas those who were a little below that don't get that opportunity to marry a successful woman anymore because she's marrying a successful man as well. And then it creates a dynamic of a power struggle. Well, I make a lot of money, you make a lot of money. Who's the head of the house? Where before it was the man, right? And the man provided and the woman took care of home. Those days are gone. So I think it's an adjustment period. I just think for folks of color, and I say this all the time when I speak, is as a people, we're coming into our abundance, right? Of being highly educated, of having positions of power, of being entrepreneurs, of being politicians, all these things. So it's new for a very powerful black man to sit across from a very powerful black woman and figure out the dynamic and raise children in a neighborhood of people who probably don't look like them in the school. So there's a lot to be discussed and a lot to deal with when you come to the table with that. And I think I struggle with it personally, I'm not gonna lie. I mean, I'm not married, and when you do meet another woman who is successful and powerful, it's this. For the first, you know, however many months you're getting to know each other. So it does, yeah. So for me, I'm speaking for myself. I'm not speaking for anybody else.
I agree with you. I've had the same.
But why?
Why?
I think we need examples of what you mean by
their personalities are putting, or you are uncomfortable
I think,
with.
No, not me being uncomfortable with it. I think it's a situation where I think what I'm about to say is somewhat controversial, but I think women want that until they actually get it, especially from a man. I think, no, it's the truth.
What? I'm not.
Wait.
I'm keeping it positive. I think black women want a very successful, powerful black man until they get one and understand everything that comes along with it.
So I clean things up for a living, right? So let me clean this up.
Oh, wait.
Before you say that,
You got the ring as proof.
Before you say that, and to add to his point, circling back before you get into that, Mr. Cleanup Man.
Mr. Cleanup Man.
One of the highest growing suicide rates in the country is in African American men, right? And so to his point, there is a gap. Women are communal in terms of dealing with their traumas, right? Men are in silos.
Well, you guys aren't emotionally resilient, so.
Huh?
I don't think black men are emotionally resilient.
Right. So men deal with stuff in silos, right? So it's a whole different. Right.
You just gonna gloss right over that?
She said we're not emotionally resilient.
Yeah.
A lot of men are not.
Y'all are not emotionally resilient.
You agree with that?
It's
As
not
a whole,
biological.
black men aren't
No.
emotionally resilient?
Resilient. Hold up. Let me say this. No, the reason why I agree with her statement To a degree. Because I work with men for a living. Like I work with men. There are men who are.
But are you?
Of course, I'm emotionally resilient.
Are you?
I am.
Are you?
And do we think that
Are
the
you?
norm is in the room? We think that the universal norm is in this room right now,
I
represented?
absolutely do. I think
That's
the
not
universal
true.
norm is in
You
this
just
room.
talked about
If that's the case, then they wouldn't have died suicide.
What does that mean, though?
It's a lot of trauma.
I've tried to commit suicide.
It's
What
a
do-
lot
what does
of
that mean?
trauma. It's a lot of trauma.
I think that's actually part of it. I think that's actually part of it, of addressing that. What are you describing as emotional resilience? Like, I think it's part of addressing those issues that you have and bringing them forward and being able to deal with it. But I think you had a problem with me saying that this wasn't everybody, but you also made a broad stroke and said black men aren't emotionally resilient. I don't think it's all black men.
I don't think.
Some.
I think that men, as a collective, if we had to do the majority,
'Cause
are not emotionally resilient, and I stand by that.
I agree with
and we can agree to disagree. It's
Yeah,
fine.
absolutely. Yeah, no, absolutely.
But I think
I know it to be true.
The only reason I disagree, going back to your point, is because, yes, and you mentioned this, the black women are home, right? Or back in the day, because they're not home anymore.
Black women have always had to work.
No.
Black women have always had to work. We've had our housewives, but black women.
Hold on. Let me make a clear point.
Let him finish.
All right, how clean my
Not
own
necessarily as doctors.
I clean up things for a living. I was only hold on.
Let him finish. Let him finish.
That's the point I wanted.
I was only repeating what she said. That wasn't my words. She said those words. I was repeating that. Okay. So the reason why I think I can't agree that black men are not emotionally resilient is because if you look at the history, right, of how we were able to get the certain freedoms that we have today, right, it took some very resilient black men, right, on a whole, I'm talking about on a whole, right, to be able to put themselves last, right, in order for us to be where we are today. And let me just make this last point. And talking about resiliency and the things that black men, not going back to what you said, like tit for tat, but there's no way we can say that. And I understand where you're coming from, but there's no way I can sit here and say that black men are not.
So here's the thing. I don't want you to confuse emotional suppression with emotional resilience.
Right.
That is a difference.
Okay, make it clear.
There's a difference.
Yeah.
I think men are really good at suppressing emotions and keeping it moving.
Compartmentalizing.
Compartmentalizing and keeping it moving.
Absolutely.
You are excellent
There's
at
a
it.
difference between that and emotional resilience. Are men resilient? Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Men are resilient, but I'm talking about
agreeing with that.
emotionally resilient. That is not the same thing. You're married, right? So you share something with your wife, right? That's very, very deep and personal to you, right? And she takes it in, and then you guys have an argument, and she brings it back up. That part of your heart will never ever be allowed to be exposed to your wife ever again. That's what I mean by emotional resilience.
It has to do with vulnerability.
It has to do with vulnerability. When a man is vulnerable and you violate that, he's never going to be vulnerable.
It's why
with you.
women can come back
Yes.
from a breakup and like a man can be cheated on and he'll never trust. Like
Yeah.
it might take him 5 years to get over it, whatever it is, or however long from the timing of it. Whereas a woman will sit there and be like, "All right, girl, let's get back out there." It's just the ability to be able to bounce back. The bounce back on men emotionally. Obviously, and dealing with your trauma.
Because you're
there-
serious.
That's what I'm saying.
Like,
Yeah.
like I said, I need to understand the time frame or whatever. Because what that explanation, what you're saying is like males cannot ever we can't get over anything, right?
Now we're getting somewhere.
Right.
Yeah.
Because you're
black men who don't get over a lot of stuff.
I just don't.
I don't agree with that either.
Okay.
I don't agree either. I think that where we are right now is in this place where we really are questioning everything we've been told about masculinity and what femininity is. I think for a lot of men, they've grown up in what I call suck it up culture. It's like something happens to you when you're a little boy. What are you crying for? Suck it up. So you learn. Don't be a punk. Don't be that masculinity is sucking it up. And then what happens is you get older and there's some things you can't suck up. You need to express, like what we do when we break up. You need to cry. And can I just finish this point? And so in a culture where we have defined masculinity in terms that aren't necessarily healthy, we've defined it as emotional suppression, we've defined it as stoicism, as irrational, as logic, and as domination. And in a culture where we've defined femininity as acquiescence, as being your worth being tied to your beauty and your youth, as being codependent and even needy sometimes. We've defined both of these genders in very pejorative terms. We've gotten to a place where this is not working anymore. So, for example, being on a date, I guess, with a independent, strong woman. There are some women who are very independent in finances, but needy as hell in emotion. And I think that you go on a date like that, you're gonna feel this. But when you get the real thing, you're gonna feel something else, I promise you. So maybe you need to keep looking. So, I mean, that's the one thing. But also, if you've been told that love as a man also means domination, that to love you means I have to make more money than you and be the provider. This is what love is. It has to be this some sort of, and by domination I don't mean like Godzilla domination. I mean just that I'm bringing in most of the money and I've got the power in, in the relationship. I have a certain amount of control. That's how society has defined love for you. And now you have a woman that is maybe equal financially or just defining herself outside of her relationship to you. She's got an identity out in the world that may feel like uncomfortable because it's going to require you to reevaluate not just who you are as a person, but who you are within the relationship and what love means to you. And I think that's actually beyond black and white. I think our society.
I want to support her point. So me, growing up, my last name Pierre is very big in my community, in government and politics, huge thing, right? Then I decided to marry a doctor, right? Who her last name is published. This is who she's known as, right? In her career, in her trajectory.
So she hyphenated?
Huh?
Did she hyphenate?
No. Right?
Took your name?
No.
She didn't take your name.
Wait. But this is the thing. When the conversation came to the table, it was like, because wait. And that's why I said I want to support her point. She got to change every single white coat that she has. If someone is researching her, they will not find her if she changes her name. Certain opportunities in her field come from people looking for her based off of an article that they read or some research that she did, X, Y, and Z. Right? So at that point, my last name, I have a political family, and then I'm like your man's man, right? Yeah. And I got to deal with the chat, right? I got to deal with the bros in the chat. So what do I do at that moment? Right?
Did you feel emasculated?
Huh?
Did you feel emasculated when she didn't take your name?
No. I'm saying this is a conversation, right? We had the conversation. The conversation had to happen.
I think he was.
At that moment. Because when you go to the justice of the peace and you have to get the marriage license, that's when the conversation has to come up.
If not before.
If not before, right? Because it's like, all right, what are we gonna do here?
Right.
And everybody's looking at each other, right? Like, well, and I'm like, yeah. What you mean? Go ahead.
Right.
And it's like, no, actually, we need to have a conversation. And at that point, I had to understand, like, this is my wife, right? She has made it to a point in her career. This is she had to fight to get here. It wasn't a breeze, right? She did 12 years. Yeah, this is a 12-year journey,
right?
Yeah. And I had to understand. I had to say to myself, you know what, babe? Without having the 5-hour back and forth,
right?
I had to be like, you know what, babe? It's cool.
Yeah.
Salute you, man.
I said it was cool. And guess what she said to me? She was like, but socially, I want to be known as Mrs. Pierre.
Actually, so my mom is a physician, and she graduated medical school before me. My dad already established herself, and she doesn't change. She's her maiden name, professionally.
Socially,
but socially,
right? And I didn't have to ask that. I didn't have to say, well, you know what, but when people, I didn't have to do that because there was a conversation that was there.
Right.
A lot of men probably would think
That
I'm
communication
soft,
is key.
right? Oh, she's walking
It really
all over
would've
you,
been
Sam,
hard to change it.
X, Y, and Z. It would have been really, really tough, right? So, to support your point, I think it's us as men, sometimes we have to also be like, you know, like, all right, because it's touch. No, let me tell you, man, like, not everybody can do that, but I also understand that in a relationship, when you're talking, okay, but touch it.
Yeah, and
Touch it.
And let me
It's a different, and let me end off by saying this. It's different folks, different strokes for different folks, because that's a very high level conversation right there. Some people can't even enter that, right, because they're not mentally even prepared, right? Some people are, and I started by saying, brother Bishop, I started by saying that it was not even a question. Like, my family members was calling her Mrs. Pierre even before she was Mrs. Pierre, because it was like, there's no conversation.
I think it's just even powerful that this is even a conversation. Like,
right. One of the things that you brought up, Tyrone, I found very interesting. You said that when women, they think they want a man who's of a certain level of success.
until they get it.
Until
Damn,
they
I
get
got away with
it.
it.
No, he didn't. Oh, trust. Until they trust and believe. I never forget. Okay? I may not. Yes. Right. Yes. So until they get it.
Yeah.
What that implies is that we have to conform to your expectation,
No, it doesn't.
and we have to fit a mold based on what you want. Right?
No.
It's never a conversation. It's never a conversation to say, okay, she may not be everything I want, so I may have to, temper my expectations, just like I may not be everything that she wants. Let's come together and figure out what works for us as a couple. The conversation is often, she thinks this is what she wants until she gets it. No, why don't we come in as flexible human beings who come with baggage
What you said before.
and
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
history and culture and lifestyles and the way we grew up and family dynamics and money and the way we approach money and career, and decide together, where do we find happy mediums, as opposed to this idea that we just are supposed to conform.
It puts the
and
onus on the woman, really.
it puts the onus
Well,
on
if
the
that's the
woman.
way you took it, then that's not the way.
that's not the way I'm- that's not the way I'm
that's-
interpreting what you
Thank
said.
you. So here's my thing, right? We can do all these generalizations, but let's make it personal. You're an attorney. When you meet men, is that easy?
It absolutely isn't easy.
And why is it?
Often men come in with preconceived notions about who they think I am.
Okay,
Argumentative, inability to let them lead, inability to be supportive towards them, all of which are false. Go ahead.
Right. So my point in saying that is, right, if it's and again, I'll even drill down a little more. I'm talking about black and brown folk. If you are in a situation where, and again, speaking personally, some of the conversations that we've had, it was on the podcast. There are things that come with a black man that has a position of power, that is affluent, that has reach, that has scope, right? That he may not be home all the time. He may not be emotionally available for you, right? He may have to do certain things. And when I say that, I mean he may not always be there to answer phone calls or whatever, because he's running in and out of meetings, this, that, or whatever, and then you
Right.
start to get into issues of infidelity and all these other things.
Wait, what
So protect. What I'm saying is the thought of it. Not that it's actually happening, but that becomes the thought. So my whole point in saying that is, right? My whole point in saying that is, if there's all these things that come along with it, then you get issues of what are you doing, where are you doing it, how are you doing it, and it becomes a power struggle with everything else that's underlying.
Okay, can
And
I offer a counter argument?
Sure.
Now let's flip those roles. I am an attorney.
Okay.
I work very long hours. I have
Okay.
a podcast and many passion projects.
Okay.
There are days that a man may text me and say, "Hey, what's up?" And I'm in back-to-back meetings. And by the time I get back to my
Why
phone,
didn't you text me back?
it is, "Why didn't you text me back?"
Take
So
the phone to
the mercy and the grace, there's a
duality.
There is a
There's
duality.
a duality.
I'm kidding.
No, I know you're kidding, but I think that it is I think it's still very powerful. I think I can even take this back to even in college, being Greek and dating a non-Greek in school. And like someone's messaging and you're talking about it's 3 a.m., but you're at activities for your organization. You know what I'm saying? People are like, people are asking you questions. But a non-Greek relationship, if you're with a non-Greek relationship, they're like, why are you up at 5 o'clock in the morning? Why are you just now getting home? But I think to your point,
That happens.
exactly. But I think to your point, it's interesting because it almost made it seem like if you're having issues, like you said, not being home, travel. I travel probably 45% of the year. That's a lot. I'm already diamond. You know what I mean? Like, that's a lot of travel. I hear people that I literally have men that are like, well, you're never here. Like, for me to even have that conversation. But if I'm dating someone that's like-minded, is there a sense of, you know, are you empathetic to the fact that we're both abroad? Are you empathetic to the fact that I didn't take my phone to the meeting? Are you empathetic to the fact that I know, but in reality, but like, are you empathetic to these things, or are you seeking someone that is the homebody, that is available?
I'll go a step further. I think successful men with a successful woman is more understanding than a woman is of a man. I think a man who has diamond and travel 45% of the year, just like you, will be more understanding of your situation than yours of his.
But the only reason I say that I don't agree with
and
that
again,
is because
I'm speaking very specific of men of color.
Exactly. But having been there, I would say no.
Okay, fair enough.
And only just because I've had we marry each other. We marry it, right? Because I can get you not picking up your phone. I can get you not responding to my message for a day. And honestly, for real, because I do it. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Different time zones it happens.
Right.
But I think that there is a sense, for me, from what I've seen, is that there's still a seeking of docility that I don't offer because of the fact that, like, we're not going to talk to me that way because, like, I didn't pick up my phone because I was in a meeting. You know what I mean? Like, getting a message.
I don't think you get that. And again, I want to be very clear. I love the fact that, and I was joking with my friends about this. If my wife makes more money than me, great. She has more power, great. That's not what I'm talking about. It's not a power thing. I'm just saying it becomes an issue when it's, all right, well, again, and look at, and I don't know, you guys say your experiences of meeting men, right? Do you meet men of equal caliber?
Yep. At times.
Right? Yes. At times, right? Not sometimes, or maybe you do, maybe always, but you always meet men of equal caliber. So if you always meet men of equal caliber, then it becomes a situation where you figure it out. But I would, from what I hear and from what most black women say, they really don't meet men who meet them where they are in terms of education,
financially, education.
Well, education, experience, culture, being traveled.
But it goes back to what you said in the beginning. Guys are always behind the girls.
Right, exactly. So I think it's rare.
And then the ones that have it, it's like a smorgasbord.
Yeah.
So why settle down? Like, I have a friend, and I have to tell this story because we talk about it all the time. It's a smart, but for me, in the ones that have it, it's smorgasbord. Like, I have a friend, Morehouse, MIT, Harvard, dual degree, knows like 3 languages, has been to 60 countries, works for McKinsey, like all of these things that, like, a woman would see this and be like, oh my God, ovaries in overdrive.
Jackpot.
Like, this is what I'm looking for. And literally, it's a smorgasbord. Like, he literally is just like, wherever he wants to be. Oh, I'm in Kenya, let me hit up this girl. Oh, I'm in London, let me hit up this girl. And there's no he's not emotionally available.
Yeah.
Exactly. Available because of the fact that he can have girlfriends in different area codes. I get all the sides of it, and that's why, like, and that is not even an unfortunate thing. Like, my father was a blue collar man. I have no problem being with a man that makes less money than me. Now, my homegirls don't agree with that. Like, I jokingly always talk about, like, I'm honestly just looking for a stay-at-home father. So I'm gonna have these kids, and you can take care of the babies. And
he said, ooh.
And literally, I've had that conversation with men.
No, really quickly. Imagine if one of the men at the table said that.
Yeah.
I'm looking for a stay-at-home woman, barefoot, naked in the kitchen.
Yeah. Right.
Oh my God.
Barefoot and naked?
What is going on?
In that case, the naked part. But it's like, it's like that's right. You're able to say that with so much comfort. Yeah, we can't.
Obviously. Well,
right?
I mean, but no, because no woman.
And I'm down.
No woman speaks like that. That's not one.
I'll definitely stay home. But I'm just saying.
But women aren't saying that. A woman's not saying. A majority of women are not saying, I want to be a stay-at-home. I want a stay-at-home husband. Most women are saying either, nah, I want equality, or we can switch off, or like that's not a common statement. But to your point, and there are a ton of women who literally are looking to retire now. Like, so if you said I'm looking for a woman, I can give you 16 phone numbers right now. So you want to have a stay-at-home wife? I got you. For me, I don't think that that's
a whole nother
It's a whole other conversation.
But one of the things I just wanted to highlight from what you said to drop some clarity. I agreed with you. I agree with you when you say sometimes, black women don't know. They want something until they get it, right? But I agree with you, right? But I agree with you because of the trauma and the hurt that black men have done to black women.
I have caused more
Right.
trauma to
So-
more
and to
women
that-
than whatever.
and
And,
because
that's
of
what I'm
that-
saying. I'm speaking from
There you
experience.
go. And so because of that, I can
I am
agree with
enemy
you
number one when it comes
because we've done women wrong.
Yes.
And because we've done women wrong, you're gonna get like women who are very skeptical, who are going to turn us off, right? Because
We? Who's we? I'm just saying. We just went through a whole exercise about not like generalizing, and you're sitting there talking about we did women wrong.
Never had? He said speak to yourself. He's a prince.
You never had?
we never broke a heart.
Listen,
Let him answer.
Listen.
You never had?
as far as I know, no.
Wow.
I noticed I said as far as I know.
There's outliers in every
There is
group.
exactly. There is an anomaly in every.
Why is this thing that men
Have you ever heard
always-
anyone? Have you ever heard anyone?
He said,
Have you ever heard anyone?
But
Right.
this
So,
is
yes.
what I'm
So you're
saying.
the outlier. You're the outlier in the group.
In the
You're
room.
outlier.
In the room.
That's all.
And watch this. And to end my point, most of the time, right? If we do research, we'll see the reason why we've hurt women because our examples have encouraged it. Hey, you 16 years old and you have a girlfriend? You crazy. You crazy, man. You better go out there and get 3 girls. What did I know? I didn't grow up saying, oh, I want to have 5 girlfriends. I had my cousins, my older cousins. I remember I was making out with my girlfriend. He was like, you're making out with her? Like, what are you doing?
That's
Are you
it?
kidding me?
What are you doing?
Yeah. That's
But listen,
it.
my brother, so I had graduated with my brother. I went off to college, and the way that people were were confiscating his virginity was insane. Like, people were just like, why are you still a virgin? Like, what are you,
Like it's a
why are you still, like, what are you doing? Like, it's something, you're attractive, or are you, is something wrong? Like, you know what I mean? Like, their idea that men have to be hyper-sexed
Right.
in order to concern them.
So now he goes to college and he has a great time. Now he's 24, graduated, done with grad school, maybe got his MBA, and now all of a sudden, some light bulb just clicks out of nowhere. Ding! And he's like, oh, I'm a very good guy. And I just want to be a one-woman man. I just want to love you. And I don't look at girls on Instagram. And all I do all day is just thinking about you, honey. That's just supposed to happen.
Yeah.
See, and I think that speaks to what I was saying earlier, the broader issue in the culture that until we redefine
Absolutely.
what we have come to
I'm
know
finished thinking. I
as
see what you
masculinity, as femininity, and as love, we are going to find these conflicts and coming together.
Absolutely.
Because the purpose of patriarchy is male domination, sexual conquest being one form of male domination.
Absolutely.
You can't really truly love someone and see someone for who they are if your goal is to dominate them. And I actually would say that just like there are women who I'm sure think that's what they want until they get it, I think that a lot of times that happens to men. I think a lot of times there are men who see a fierce, fabulous, strong
Got her
woman
own.
and they want to break her. That's
Like a
the
horse.
appeal.
It's wild.
That's the appeal. And once that happens, then the interest goes. I also would say that, like we're talking about, like if you're powerful, he may not be available to you. So 2 things to that point. One thing is power makes you more of what you are. So there's emotionally unavailable broke men who still have women.
Absolutely.
That is true.
And there's emotionally unavailable powerful men. At the same time, I've met women who were incredibly successful and the most loving and kind people that I know. So it's who you are, not so much like you gonna match
He was always
a
going to be
chick.
this way.
He was always going to be
Well,
that
I mean,
way.
I
Yeah.
think there's, that's why you should never paint with a broad stroke. But I definitely, to his point, there are a lot of. It's funny, like my ex-girlfriend, she's a psychiatrist and a life coach, right? So imagine how those conversations went.
That must have been crazy.
You know what I mean? It was like, oh, I know this and da-da-da-da. And she said to me one time, she said, I always wanted a guy who I felt like was on my level intellectually and who was spiritual, who loved God. All the
Checked all these
checklists. I
boxes,
checked all those boxes. And she said, but then I realized, like when we were, having a parting conversation, she's like, I got what I wanted, but I don't think that's what I want.
So what did she think she wanted after you?
Don't prove this.
This
point.
emoji.
Don't do this.
So to his point,
Right.
This emoji.
I know that to be true because I actually lived it.
Right,
So I
exactly.
can't say that for every. Obviously, I can't say it for every black woman, but I can say that is true. Like, but I think that's true for everybody. Like, something that you really
think
want,
it
and
is.
then you get it, and then you're like.
But how do you know what you want if you never had it?
Exactly.
Right, and we're not given an
Absolutely,
opportunity to
absolutely.
explore.
Right.
And
Have
see
you
whether
been
this is what I
engaged
want.
to
Yes.
test things out?
And don't come in and project what you think it is that you
Now,
want and what you don't.
Projection.
That's it.
No shade though. She definitely still be in my DMs though.
Okay.
I want to throw that out there.
Just so we're clear.
Okay, this has been a lovely evening. It's about time to wrap it up, but I want to give everyone an opportunity to give final words tonight and their thoughts on this interaction, the podcast, or whatever you'd like. Starting with you.
I think it was incredible to be in a room with like-minded, educated individuals. I think that perspective and some surprises, because I didn't know any of you before I stepped into this room and started eating dinner with you all. And I think that my mind has been open to a few different ideas, potentially, and I look forward to seeing how this continues to grow.
So tonight was absolutely fantastic, and what I realized about tonight was that men rule and women don't. No, I'm
Somebody had to say it.
But I really love the conversation, and we need to have more of this. So you're absolutely fantastic, and we salute you. And let's continue building.
Yes.
It's like the multiple. I'm still getting over your comment. So this conversation highlights like a lot of things, right? We still. It's good that we're able to have an intellectual conversation about not only just our experiences with race, but also our experiences with each other. And I think there's a lot more that we need to talk about with each other.
Yes.
Because there's a lot of assumptions, there's a lot of decisions that are made based on either things that we were told in our past that we still, just like we were talking about with therapy, that we have not confronted. And I think it's on both sides, right? Absolutely. Our black men and our black women, we all have things that we need to discuss. And I'm really happy that you brought us together. It's going to be interesting to see if you make a bigger table and see how that conversation goes. And it could be you add additional elements, but I'm really looking forward to see the next step. So thanks for having me at this table, and then looking forward to the future.
So I spent the majority of the conversation listening, and I thought I was very impressed, one, by being able to disagree in a very civil manner. I thought that was great, and I also was blown away by how well everyone articulated their thoughts. I think one of the things that I always talk about is getting people together in any forum of different backgrounds, of different abilities, to get in a room and discuss real topics and just be open, right? And it does take someone to either say something or whatever to get people comfortable with just telling the truth and being open with their feelings. And I thought this was a great environment to do that. And even when that happened, we were still able to disagree in an amicable way, and it was very, very erudite and intelligent. So I was thoroughly blown away. Thank you, Delisha.
Thank you.
Damn, I don't want to go after that.
Come on.
Dang. Talk about one up then.
Two-Week Wonder next to you.
Yeah, I know. Talk about one up then. I'm gonna keep mine very simple. Let me go through my SAT words. But no, I had a wonderful time. This was incredible. This is actually better than what I thought it was going to be. Because I thought I was going to be like, man, I'm just going to be antisocial. I'm not going to talk to nobody. Then she spoke, and I was like, oh. I got to come in, man. And just the camaraderie and us not knowing each other, we had each other's back.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Even though we disagree, we had each other's back. And I think that's beautiful. And I don't see that too much, honestly speaking. But this was just an incredible conversation, and I love the way you guys think and the way you guys process and the way that your perspective on things is very, very beautiful. I listen to people for a living every day, and I must say that you guys are really, really impressive. group of people. Thank you so much, Delisha, for having me, and I can't wait to see how this platform expands globally. Globally. Yeah.
I have loved this experience. I think we started off this discussion by talking about soft skills, and we all agreed that the ability to make someone else feel seen is a very valuable soft skill, and we all displayed that we have that today. It's what made this conversation so significant for us and for the people who will watch this. And I think it's important to bring people together with different perspectives. It's also important to every once in a while challenge how you've defined yourself, and challenge how you love, and challenge, the energy that you're putting into the world. I think that helps us grow. So it's only a good thing. So I thank you so much for having me, Delisha, and I do look forward to seeing how this platform grows for you.
Awesome. All right. Well, first I just want to say this was a phenomenal dinner, and I had a great time. One thing that I noticed is that I'm sitting around a room with a few folks that I just don't know, but I feel like I know them. And I don't think Delisha understands how she's created a new network of people that are like-minded, and I don't think you even understand what's going to be birthed out of just putting these people around this table.
Absolutely.
And I think that's true power, being able to identify the right people, putting them around the table, and then new ideas, new business opportunities, new partnerships are birthed out of that, and we can come back and remember. We was around the table. That's where we met.
Right.
And I think that's the true power of what this podcast is about. And it's giving people who may have ideas or may want to start something, giving them that energy, right? And that battery to get up and do that. And I think not a lot of people can do that. And I think this podcast is going to go national, and I can't wait to see it.
Absolutely.
All right, so I'll do final words real quick, and then we'll hit the toast, okay? It was.
Come on now, that was natural.
But you will understand in a moment why. Okay. First and foremost, thanks to our chef, Wayne Clark, the former chef. Very important. And this thank you is very important because I am the one on camera, and I'm seeing a lot. People think that I make this happen by myself. But the December 26er podcast does not work without our producer, Damarcus Adisa. Who's off camera, but you all know that he's my real life blood brother. And when I'm ready to say, we can't go another step, he's the one that says, no, I have an idea, I spoke to a person, let me make a few phone calls, leveraging his connections as well. And that's why this works, because where I am weak, he is strong. And we bring our minds together, we bring our hearts together and our passion, and this is what we have birthed as a result. So you guys hear from him a lot. You see he's the one on the text messages, he's the one who has the bandwidth often to follow what you're doing online and making sure we shout you out. So while I may be in the forefront, it only works because I have someone behind me who's pushing me forward and supporting me when everybody else is asleep and everybody else goes home. He's in the trenches with me.
I love it.
So thank you, and shout out to Damarcus. Are you going to get in the shot?
Yeah.
And let's raise a glass. I am grateful to all of you. We would not have a brand, we would not have a podcast if you didn't agree to come on to this relatively unknown brand and tell your stories, humanize yourselves, and be very candid. So I appreciate what you've done for us. Cheers to Blackness.
Amen.
Cheers to being able to sit and acknowledge our hardships but overcome in spite of. Cheers to being extraordinary on an ordinary day.
Yeah.